Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Arts and Culture Forum for Council District 1. I'm Heath Fox, Executive Director of the La Jolla Historical Society, whose mission is to make history relevant and meaningful to contemporary life, and to serve as a resource and gathering place where residents and visitors explore history, art, ideas, and culture. We present rotating exhibitions, educational programs for youth and lifelong learners, maintain an archive for public research, and consult on historic preservation, serving the community of La Jolla, the city of San Diego, and the cultural tourists who visit from throughout the Southern California and Northern Mexico region, as well as national and international travelers. Visit us online at lajollahistory.org. We're extremely pleased to welcome all of our guests this evening. Thank you for attending this webinar. This is the third of 5 scheduled forums on arts and culture, one for each council position up for election this year. And we invite you to attend the remaining forums. We'd also like to say how grateful we are to those who organize these forums: the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership, the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, and Arts and Culture San Diego. The core questions for the candidates are the same for those in all the district forums. And you can submit your questions during this forum using the Q&A button. You're also welcome to use the chat feature, but know that neither the candidates nor the organizational representatives will be monitoring the chat box. It's now my pleasure to welcome our organizational representatives, and I'd like to invite them to introduce themselves. Debbie, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Heath. So my name is Debby Buchholz. I'm the managing director at La Jolla Playhouse, which is proudly in District 1. And I'm also a very proud graduate of UC San Diego. But for the last 18 years, I've been the general manager and now the managing director of the Playhouse. And it's our pleasure to live in District 1, but to also serve frankly, the people of all of San Diego, in addition to cultural tourists and San Diego residents who come and visit us for our 6 play subscription season. We also work with the university in training their MFA theater resident students, all of the graduate theater arts students there. Our education piece, our pop tour, goes out into the city throughout the spring, although this year it will be virtual, to classrooms throughout San Diego County. We have an active presence with the military, and we do a series of Without Walls programming throughout the city that goes into every district at some point during the course of a couple of years, including a set of festivals, to bring arts and culture to all of San Diego. So we're proud to be part of District 1 and very happy to be here this evening.
Thank
Back to you, Heath.
Stephanie, your turn.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Thompson. I'm a member of the board and chair of the communications committee for Bodhi Tree Concerts, which is an award-winning nonprofit performing arts ensemble based in District 1, but that performs all over San Diego. Bodhi Tree Concerts' mission is to perform intentional acts of kindness through music. We do this by exclusively featuring local artists, programming diverse repertoire in a series of concerts each season, from jazz to classical, operettas, musicals, and more. And the profits from each concert are then donated entirely to nonprofit charitable organizations. We partner with a different one for each concert. So this year, due to COVID, of course, we have taken our concerts entirely online, and I urge everyone to check out what's coming up next at bodhitreeconcerts.org. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll start by welcoming Joe LaCava. Joe, thank you for participating in this forum. We're joined by representatives from arts and culture organizations in District 1 and from around the city. Right. Before we start our questions, we'd like to give you up to 5 minutes to make an opening statement. What would you like to tell everyone about yourself and why you're running for office?
Sure. Well, thank you, Heath, and thank you to all of you who are attending tonight, and of course, all of you that spent the time to organize these. I know how challenging it is to bring the different players together. But I think I'll do a basic thumbnail sketch of a biographical sketch, talk a little bit about why I'm running, and maybe start to delve into the topic of this conversation. I am a native San Diegan, the son of Italian immigrants. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress, and I went to San Diego State, and that allowed me to become a licensed civil engineer. And so my career has been in connected with that civil engineering, initially with public infrastructure, then in housing, and then more recently in public policy. But the reason that I am running really has to do with the fact about, a little bit 15, 20 years ago, I decided that it was time for me to give back to my community. I knew that I had expertise and experience that could benefit the community. I actually just was starting with my neighborhood on a small scale. And then over time, it really evolved into community-wide leadership and activism, and then citywide activism over those years. And even though I'm a civil engineer, and we often get put in a box of, oh, you're the guys that move the dirt and put in the pipes, that in fact, the depth and breadth of what I've been involved with over the years has greatly expanded to nearly every facet about what a city does. Certainly, if you're a community activist in La Jolla, you really get the full depth and breadth of what a city deals with. And so it's a good training ground to be a council member. But that experience and that expertise, the relationships I built, the track record that I've created over the years, led a number of people to urge me to run to be the next council member, since Councilmember Bree has decided not to come back for a second term, but to run for mayor. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. I think with 5 first-time council members going to be elected, the experience that I'll bring will help being a unifying voice in tackling some of the challenges we have. We had challenges coming into City Hall anyway, but with the pandemic, it just is that much more exacerbated, and will certainly be part of this conversation going forward. Perhaps a little more apropos to give you a little bit of taste. One of the things that I've become known for is my willingness to jump into areas that are necessarily outside of my wheelhouse. In terms of arts and culture, as Debbie mentioned, our choice has been the theater, primarily the La Jolla Playhouse, where we are subscribers for quite a few years now, as well as taking advantage of the Old Globe, and of course enjoying some of the other arts and cultures that Balboa Park has to offer, and we see across the city. But we certainly could not be characterized as art patrons by any stretch of the imagination. But time and time again, I've really stepped up when asked. I've done a little bit of work, as Heath knows, with the Historical Society, helping save the historic La Jolla Post Office, and other technical issues where people have reached out to me for help. The murals of La Jolla that I hope you're all familiar with, in its early days, folks reached out to me to understand how the city regulations might deal with their ambitious program, and I gave them advice that helped them navigate the city bureaucracy, and it's a very successful program, and I'm really excited where they've gone with that. The music center that is now open in La Jolla, they reached out to me in the early days about, again, how do we help make this happen? How do we navigate the community and build support? How do we navigate some of the regulations the city has? And time again, you find me getting involved in that, not only in arts and culture, but on issues throughout our city, in every corner of our city. And so the last thing I'll conclude with is that as a council member and being familiar with City Hall on the 10th floor, I come into this with wearing 2 hats. One as a representative of my council district, District 1, and meeting the needs of the constituents who live there. And in District 1, constituents have a high expectation. It consumes a lot of time out of that council office. But I also see myself wearing a citywide hat, and my priorities citywide are a little bit different. And I'll touch on one that I know will come up later, or I suspect will come up later, and that is something that I call social equity. It is my commitment to work with the council offices in districts 4, 8, and 9, where we have the concentration of our traditionally underserved communities, to help whatever they need that I can be of help, to try to make sure that we start to restructure City Hall, that we make sure all San Diegans get to enjoy the opportunity that our city has, and make sure that the services we provide are a little more equitable across that. And I think arts and cultures falls into that category as well. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. So I can continue talking about myself, but I'll stop there and let us get into the Q&A. Thank you, Heath.
Thank you, Joe. Let's get straight into our questions. Attendees at our first forum submitted a number of questions that we're asking all candidates. Additionally, we've asked our attendees today to add questions to the Q&A during the forum. Debbie, will you get us started?
So, Joe, arts and culture organizations are essentially small businesses, and like all small businesses, we've been hit very hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. But unlike for-profit businesses, we are unable to access the city's most recent small business recovery funding. So when we emerge from this pandemic, we're likely to see a very devastated or severely hobbled arts and culture sector, and there are immediate and longer-term needs for recovery. Would you support city investment or a special recovery fund to assist the arts, culture, and creativity sector's recovery during COVID-19 shutdown and future reopening? And to ensure that, and would you ensure that any funding or recovery plan for small businesses includes nonprofit organizations?
The simple answer is yes. There really is no reason to exclude nonprofits from this conversation. Small businesses, of course, are the important element of our economy here in our city, but so too are nonprofits, an important part of who we are as a city. And sometimes people, having been in charge of a few nonprofits in my day, nothing at the scale that we're talking about here, I know that they get treated differently. Well, you have your donors and your benefactors, but it's not as simple as that. They employ a number of people. I know arts and culture has most folks don't appreciate how many folks are employed in that industry, if you will. So that is an important part. The city obviously has limited resources to do that kind of work, but to the degree that we can capture state and federal funds, it should be more broadly interpreted to apply to not only the for-profit small businesses, but also the nonprofits, because we want both of them to thrive. We appreciate the generosity of those who have really stepped up during this pandemic to help our nonprofits who have lost a lot of the revenue sources. But we have to make sure that we as a city take advantage of every opportunity and include nonprofits within that same scope.
Stephanie, you have a very popular question from the attendees regarding capital reinvestment.
I do, Heath. Joe, the city owns a number of arts and cultural facilities across the city, among them downtown theaters, Liberty Station buildings, and of course, Balboa Park. Many of these facilities have significant deferred maintenance, and their surrounding infrastructure is badly underfunded. Do you support and will you commit to pushing for the creation of a viable action plan to fund Balboa Park deferred maintenance, infrastructure, and facilities, as well as increased support for city-owned cultural assets across the city?
Again, the simple answer is yes. I see this as part of my wheelhouse as a civil engineer and someone who pays particular attention to infrastructure, and have done a number of things that have improved the conversation about infrastructure in the city, not come anywhere near solving that. And I've always kept a particular eye about the numbers that we're talking about in terms of how large the deficit is at Balboa Park. I'm slightly encouraged that the city is being, I'll say, a little more honest about the infrastructure deficit that we have in terms of the things that most people are familiar with, the roads, the sewer pipes, the storm drains, et cetera. But we continue to not really disclose of how far we are in the hole. And we're going to have to get very creative. It's tough to have a conversation right now during the pandemic, and a budget that is, has taken severe cuts and it's likely to take more cuts when we reconvene convene in September and take another look. But this is part of the commitment that we're supposed to be honoring as a city to the taxpayers and the residents and the businesses and everything that is about us as a city. And every day that we kick the can down the road, the choices get fewer and it gets more expensive to tackle these problems. And Balboa Park, who is supposed to be one of the jewels of our city, attracting not only the residents an opportunity to enjoy what the city has to offer, but attract tourists, that we've really done a pretty miserable job. Some of that is hidden, folks don't know about it, but the deficit is pretty astounding when you really look at the numbers. And so for me, the approach that I'm going to take is that everything has to be on the table. I'm looking forward to the next administration that will take a harder look at how we operate as a city to see whether there's funds in there that can be redirected in a more cost-effective way. We have to look at new revenue streams, which is a tough sell in this town, especially a tough sell when folks don't have a lot of confidence that we spend the money we have very wisely, but we have to get there if we're serious. Because I look in District 1 where we have some of our newest communities in the city, and eventually that infrastructure is going to start wearing out. And what are we going to do when that starts happening and those folks start getting interested in that? So I think it's time to honoring the commitment. What I'm particularly interested in, one of the reasons I jumped into the race is I'm tired, as I'm sure you're tired, of a lot of talk, a lot of photo ops, a lot of sound bites, a lot of reports that get put on the shelf and nothing ever happens out of that. Let's create, as you said, action plans where we actually start tackling, have some of the difficult conversations that we need to have that a lot of elected officials don't like to have. I'm not going to be afraid to do that. I have a reputation of telling people what they need to hear, not what they what they want to hear. And so I'm prepared to start tackling that. And what we have to do is we have to be very open. We have to be very transparent about how we do that, because people get upset when they think you're doing something behind closed doors. But I'm confident that we have a path that we can get there. May not be as fast as we would like, especially given how our economy has been wrecked by the pandemic. But we're going to come up with an action plan and start tackling these things one by one.
I think I have another popular question.
Okay.
It is for us anyhow. As you may know, 4 cents of every dollar of TOT raised by the city is dedicated to the promotion of the city. In 2012, the City Council passed a resolution called Penny for the Arts, which promised 1 cent of that 4 cent portion would go towards funding support for arts and culture programs and institutions. To date, however, funding for arts and culture has fallen far short of that goal, and every year we're forced to engage in fierce advocacy to secure even a fraction of the promised funding. Do you support fully funding the Penny for Arts and Culture plan, which is 9.52% of the TOT? And would you support an ordinance that clearly defines a maximum 4-year phased-in timeline and makes it a certain part of the budget process rather than having it be treated as a loose guideline?
Yeah, that's a continuing problem we have in our city that I kind of alluded to earlier about, we get excited, we get reality behind something, and then we put a program together, and then we don't honor that commitment so that people, you come in, okay, we won, we finally had the big argument, we had the big debate, we got what we wanted, and then you wake up the next morning going, boy, did we really get what we wanted, or did we just get another promise and photo op? And clearly we have seen there was a lack of commitment to actually meeting that goal, that 5-year, what I think was a 5-year phase in to that target, never materialized going forward. And I think you took a pretty big hit in this last budget cycle. I'll be candid, the conversation I would have had maybe 6 months ago is a little bit different than the conversation today. I am prepared to make a commitment to get to the penny of the arts, to change it from a nice policy resolution that doesn't really have much enforcement to a commitment. I understand how important that is. It is not what I sometimes get a little nervous about, a lockbox where it's a specific number of dollars that ties future council hands. This is just a percentage of whatever revenue comes in under the TOT classification. I'm going to probably throw out more of a 5-year time frame, given where the state of the economy is and how long it may take to recover from that. We have to have a balanced budget every year, so that ties our hands in terms of doing that. But the idea of actually putting it, as you suggest, into an ordinance so that there isn't that ongoing fight every year. It is something we struggle with as a city on a lot of important issues. But I'm prepared to commit to that. You said 4, I'll say 5, because I just think it's going to take that little bit longer to get through the economic challenge we have right now.
Well, we don't have to quibble over 4 or 5. will you commit to always including achieving and maintaining penny for arts and culture as a top priority in all budget discussions and in initial and revised budget memorandums?
Yeah, I will. I've seen how important it has been in my district, and I've seen how important it is in other districts. So as you know, you understand the mechanism down there. You put your budget priorities, and then you get a new budget from the mayor, and then you go at it again, and that will always be on my in my budget memo as a priority.
Thank you. I think I speak for everyone here when I say we certainly look forward to secure and sustainable funding.
Yeah, that's the key, right? You just want to know what you have and that you can rely on that and move forward. So,
you know, current events have had an influence on a number of the questions we've received.
yeah.
Stephanie, your next question, please.
Yeah.
Joe, as part of the mayor's commitment to a city that works for all, the commission has made great strides to ensure that the resources it manages are distributed in an equitable manner. To support this, the commission has launched a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment, a three-part initiative to assess our successes and deficits and ensure that the commission is equipped to provide public sector work within the city's diverse communities. How would you work with the commission to ensure that access, equity, and diversity remain a priority for all neighborhoods?
Great question. I did touch on that a little bit in my opening comments, that social equity is one of my top 3 priorities as one of 9 council members, to ensure that, as I said, that everybody, no matter where you live, you enjoy what this city has to offer. You know, I've sat on a number of boards and commissions in my community service, and they're often looked at as one-way streets. The board of commission staffed by volunteers sends its recommendations to the mayor, to the city council, and there's never a feedback loop. You can count on me to provide that feedback loop, to talk about what the commission is doing, how it's doing, the results of that initiative, and how you're meeting your goals. One of the things that you can count on is accountability. One of the other reasons that I didn't mention that I run for office is that too often we get annual reports and people talk about all the good things they did, which I'm happy to do. They do good things, but I want to hear about where things fell short. What didn't we achieve? What goals didn't we meet? And how are we going to tackle that in the upcoming year? So I expect it to be a very much of a two-way conversation, and I'm excited by that initiative, and I look forward to how that begins to roll out. But like I said, a two-way street in that conversation. And thank you all for going through. I know that's got to be a lot of work, so thank you for doing that.
There's one further question we'd like to address, and then if there's time, we'll go to questions from the audience. Debbie, will you take this one?
I'd be happy to. San Diego has an incredibly diverse culturally and historically rich arts and culture community, but it lacks the level of engagement and support from the city that many other world-class cities have enjoyed. Right now, there's an effort to create planning and engagement from the city to foster the strength of the arts and culture and creative community through a cultural plan and a cultural affairs department that would ensure planning is implemented. Do you support the creation of a cultural affairs department and the development of a citywide cultural plan that would elevate arts and culture as an industry critical to economic health and quality of life in San Diego?
Well, again, the simple answer is yes. My understanding in looking at the city budget, they actually have created a cultural affairs department. And the question is it real? You know, is it something in name only? We're obviously going to be having a new mayor come in. A lot of that falls under the mayor's purview. And I want to see that it is not just something in name, but is actually taking on the mission for the things that you described. I think that cultural master plan, which I understand is underway and is expected to emerge maybe in the spring of next year, I think that's really can be the springboard for a number of the things that we've talked about here in terms of an ordinance, locking in the penny for the arts, and the diversity initiative that you talked about, and really having that more holistic conversation. So I look for that milestone to happen. You know, like you said, for a city of our size, you know, I've learned that what we have the 4th largest number of installations. which is something that we ought to brag about. But I'm very excited about that opportunity. The other thing I'll throw in real quick is we also spend money on arts, public art in when we build new city facilities. That was a brilliant idea, but some of those actually show up in places where the public doesn't get to enjoy that. So that's another thing I'd be kind of working about, and I would hope that department as well as the commission would be helpful in making sure that when we fund public art with public money, that at some place the public gets to actually enjoy it. I don't know if there's too many examples, but we should do it a little bit better in that regards. But again, I look forward to that cultural master plan coming out in the spring, and then using that as a springboard for a lot of these conversations and bringing them to fruition.
Thank you.
It looks like we have some questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
Stephanie and Debbie, would you select one or two to ask Joe? And Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Sure. So we have a question from Jessica Barone. Hi, Jessica. Joe, how do you view the role of arts in public education? And where do you believe the dollars to fund these services and programs should come from as we recover from the pandemic in 2021 and beyond?
That's a great question. I didn't mention that my wife is a public school teacher. She teaches kindergarten. And you know, the emphasis on arts has often been lost as we've cut education budgets, and we've shifted to more of a science and math kind of curriculum. I forgot the word. I forgot the acronym. I'm sorry. But I think, you know, I've seen the importance of bringing arts to students, you know, across every community of our city, and the importance of that. I think we can look at kind of a private partnership, if you will, the school district to the degree they have funds, the city in its contribution, as well as private philanthropy, and where private philanthropy may not be sufficient in some of our underserved communities, maybe a little more emphasis on the public side. But you know, I remember as a child, even though I can't remember that far back much anymore, that the arts was an important part of what, you know, education was about, and we've kind of gotten away from that. We need to bring that back.
I do have one more question. I'm going to put in a quick plug for La Jolla Playhouse. We've actually flipped all of our education programs online, where they used to be in classes, and the upside to it is that we can actually offer them a bit more widely. So we are offering them.
It is one of the silver linings in this pandemic.
There aren't that many, but there are a few.
That's right, exactly.
I think I get the next question. You had mentioned working with your counterparts in districts 4, 8, and 9, and supporting, you know, traditionally underserved communities. And what are some of your ideas specifically for doing that? Well,
I prefer to have them take the lead since they are closer to the ground and what is the needs of their constituents. You know, I certainly have a little bit of a bias towards infrastructure, and making the infrastructure is up to par in those communities. Park space, I think, is particularly important. We've done some good work in libraries as well, but to facilitate bringing public art, and actually I understand there's quite a robust public art program that we have in those communities, but we can always do better. So I'm open to listening to what those council offices think are the priorities in their communities. So I don't really have any specifics, more of a broad approach to partner with them and what I can do to help amplify or argue for funding or policies as it may relate to their communities.
One more question, Stephanie?
Yeah, Joe, how do you envision improving and expanding public awareness of Balboa Park's many needs? Do you believe the citizens of San Diego truly understand and appreciate the role that they play in the health and future of the park?
You know, I think, you know, the second part, I think they don't. You know, I'm just going to leave it to my District 3 counterpart and let him worry about it, but, or her. I'm just joking, of course. No, it is a citywide resource, and we need to treat it that way. And we need to bring all the council offices and the mayor to have those hard conversations. Again, I think that is what is lacking. It is not just about the Conservancy or the Committee 100 or the Cultural Partnership that has that burden to do that as volunteers, it is really responsible for the elected officials to have that. And traditionally elected officials don't like to talk about that kind of stuff. And some of it is to say, we have a problem, it's a funding problem, and let's bring everybody to the table and talk about how do we tackle this? What is our priority as a city and the role that Balboa Park plays with that? I've heard a lot of different ideas, some of which are scary ideas and some of which I think I have some real merit, but we need to have a better conversation. And we as a council and the mayor have to be unified in saying that this is not a D3 burden, despite the fact that it resides solely within the District 3. It really is a citywide responsibility, and we got to start acting that way.
I'm sure everyone would like to continue this discussion, but in the interest of time, we need to move on. Joe, we'd like to give you the opportunity for a closing statement. The floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I won't take the 5 minutes. Again, thank you for this opportunity to present to the partnership and to all those that are joining in this Zoom event. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of my thoughts about my background and my priorities as a city council member and why I'm running, and to more tightly focus on the issues of arts and culture. As I mentioned at the onset, I do have this reputation of going outside of my wheelhouse to listen to the concerns of individuals and taking about 2 minutes to understand the importance and then throwing my weight behind the kinds of initiatives we need to have. One of the most important things is honoring the commitment that when we say that we have worked out a deal to solve the problem, that we actually, move through that and actually execute on that. This is not about me and what I do and what good deeds I've done and what I can brag about. It is what we do as a city. It is what you all are bringing to the table as hardworking volunteers or patrons of the arts or generous with your contributions. The city needs to step up and contribute to that because it's so important to our economy, whether it's the jobs that are there, the spending that happens, the tourists that it attracts or will attract again once we get past the pandemic. And it is one of the many things that define us, who we are as a city. I aspire to greatness of San Diego, and arts and culture plays an important part in that. You've heard me say my commitments to actually getting back and delivering the penny for the arts that we agreed to back in, 2012, and to work through this awful pandemic and to bring the resources to make sure that the nonprofits that have served us so well can survive this through whatever mechanism that we can create, some of which is happening now, but I know I will be taking on that burden as well. So again, thank you for this opportunity. My email is joe.lacava@gmail.com. If anybody has any questions, they want to reach out to me directly, happy to respond to them. And of course, joelacava.com is my website. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Joe. We really appreciate the opportunity to have had a conversation with you this evening. As a reminder to you, Joe, we're sending a related survey, and we'd ask if you could complete that for us. We'd really appreciate that as well.
I look forward to it.
Debbie and Stephanie, and to all of our audience participants for all of your questions this evening.